This is the second episode in our latest season featuring missing persons, unsolved homicides, and unresolved deaths across the United States, and the first in a two-part series. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the interviewee's own. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This series discusses crime scenes in detail. Listener discretion is advised. This is The Fall Line. In our first case of this season, we're returning to New Mexico, a state that has become familiar territory. Over the past few seasons, we've brought you the stories of Calvin Willie Martinez and Tiffany Reed, who separately disappeared in Shiprock. We've covered the missing person case of Melissa Montoya, who vanished from the Jicarilla Apache Nation on St. Patrick's Day in 2001. We've told you about the murders of Jacob Landine and Zachariah Juwan Shorty, and the unsolved double homicide of Kendrick Begay and Anthony McCants at a Farmington auto salvage yard. Many of these families found their way to us through attorney and advocate Darlene Gomez, who's been fighting for justice in missing and murdered Indigenous persons cases across New Mexico for more than 2 decades. This winter, she introduced us to several more family members, including Geraldine Toya, a renowned Jemez Laguna traditional potter. She's the mother of Shawna Toya, who died in 2021 at only 40 years old. Shawna left behind children, parents, siblings, and a boyfriend, all still seeking answers 4 years after her death on August 1st, 2021. Geraldine says that her daughter Shawna, who was also a talented potter, grew up with the family tradition and learned the family's signature design, a rainflower pattern. Geraldine told KOAT, quote, "That's how we passed on our work to the next generation." So she was ready to pass this design down to her daughters. PBS NewsHour reported that Shawna also worked in healthcare. It was a career that felt natural, her family told us, because she was someone who enjoyed caring for people. Geraldine remembers her daughter as a bright and positive force in their family. She told PBS NewsHour, quote, "She used to sing everywhere that she went. And every time she was going to talk, it was more in singing than talking." Shawna grew up on Jemez Pueblo and didn't live far away as an adult. For listeners who may be unfamiliar, according to the nation's official website, quote, "The Pueblo of Jemez is one of 19 pueblos located in New Mexico. It's a federally recognized American Indian tribe with 3,400 tribal members. The nation's land, nearly 90,000 acres, is located about 50 minutes north of Albuquerque." On July 31st, 2021, the Toya family gathered for a birthday party in Albuquerque. And according to Geraldine, they met at Main Event. That's a chain entertainment center that you can find across the United States. It offers everything from bowling to video games. It was Shawna's little sister's birthday, and they all had a great time, including Shawna. Geraldine told Source New Mexico, quote, "I talked to her at 9:30 p.m. She was talking while soaking in the bath. She said she was taking a bath because we got sore from bowling. We were laughing about that." After 11 p.m., the family says Shawna left her home to run a few errands. Rent was due the next day, on the 1st, so Shawna needed to get a money order. And she also needed milk for her kids, and she planned to do laundry, so she wanted to be prepared. Geraldine is sure that Shawna left that night with plans to get a few grocery items, the money order, and return to her children. She had not told anyone of any other plans, and it wasn't in her character to be out of contact. Hours passed, though, and Shawna did not call or return home from her errands. In the early morning hours of August 1st, an APD officer conducting what the incident report describes as, quote, "routine patrol in the Phil Chacon Park area," observed a GMC hatchback in the lot, quote, "after the park had closed." It was Shawna's car, and she was inside, in the driver's seat. The report says it was then approximately 2:26 a.m. Emergency services were called to the scene and attempted life-saving measures, but Shawna was pronounced dead before 4 a.m. According to the initial incident report, law enforcement observed a car seat installed in the back of Shawna's hatchback and, quote, "utilized RTC," that's Intelligence Center information, to, quote, "find relatives of Shawna in a hope to locate the whereabouts of her child." When no one answered, the report states that, quote, Officers went to the home that was on Shawna's driver's license, where they located her boyfriend and children. Geraldine said that her phone rang at about 3:15 and then 3:45, and she and her husband picked up when the call came again. She told PBS NewsHour, quote, "When I got the call that morning to say they found my daughter deceased at a park, and, it was like a bad dream. That's what I wanted to see it as, because I just saw her. I just spoke with her. It can't be her. It can't be her." According to KOAT, her father, Benjamin Toya, said police told them, quote, "We found your daughter unresponsive. All her windows were open in her car." The family was in a state of absolute shock, confusion and grief, they said, that has not faded in the past 4 years. Since that August morning, their questions remain without official answers. It starts with exactly what happened to Shawna, the whys and the hows, but also the circumstances that brought her to that park and who else was there with her. There is more to explain about their concerns and how Darlene Gomez came to represent their family. But it all comes back to what the family feels was a lack of investigation. Shawna's death has been reported on in the media in a few different ways, based on limited information that's been released and what the family reports they've been told. Some of that confusion seems to relate to the fact that a toxicology was done, but not a full autopsy. The understanding that we have is that in a few media outlets, there's been mention of overdose. But as Darlene Gomez Law clarified to the International Women's Media Foundation in 2022, there had not been an official, quote, overdose designation. Per the IWMF, Darlene's office, quote, reiterated that the cause of death is determined by the OMI. A blood test for substances has been done. There may have been small traces of controlled substances found, but the official cause of death has not been changed from natural causes at this point. Shawna's family wishes that a full autopsy procedure had been done, as they said they initially understood would be completed. And that's because they were incredibly disturbed by what they discovered when Shawna's body was released into their custody. According to KOAT, Geraldine said that later, quote, "When we brought her home, we found evidence on her body. She had wounds." That did not match observations noted in the incident report, where Shawna is described by law enforcement, who took photos of the scene as having, quote, "no visible signs of trauma at this time." The family has also maintained that Shawna had no history of drug use. We reached out to the Albuquerque Police Department for a statement on Shawna's case, but at the time of this recording, we have not heard back. According to Darlene Gomez and the Toya family, several aspects of the scene suggest that there could be more to the story, including evidence that indicates that Shawna was possibly robbed, and proof that at least one other person may have been in her car. As PBS NewsHour reported, the Toyas noticed Shawna's car contained empty grocery bags and that her rent money was gone, signs they believe point to robbery. The discovery of another woman's identification in the car raised additional questions that the family feels were never adequately pursued. That's why the case closure feels premature to them, and why they've been asking for further investigation since 2021. Geraldine told the IWMF that the Toyas felt that they had to become, quote, their own investigators, documenting evidence and fighting for attention to details that they felt had been missed. Darlene explained to us that she's seen these patterns before in cases involving Indigenous victims. Investigations that get closed quickly, families told to accept official conclusions, while their own observations suggest different possibilities. That evening in July became the beginning of an uphill journey for the Toya family that continues today, 4 years later, and they say that critical questions remain unanswered about the circumstances surrounding Shawna's final hours. According to Source New Mexico, while the DA's MMIWR division is communicating with the family regarding the case, Geraldine says she is still waiting for more answers. Darlene Gomez has dedicated her career to helping families navigate these systems, and Shawna's case carried particular weight. A mother of 4 children who were now left without answers. The youngest was just 2 years old when Shawna died. We sat down separately with Darlene and Shawna's mother Geraldine this fall to discuss their hopes for re-examination of the case. Between getting Shawna's children back to school, they now range in age from 5 to 18 years old, to their after-school activities, and to her own art shows, where she displays and sells her award-winning pottery. Geraldine stays busy while making time for Shawna's investigation. Since 2021, she's participated in MMIP events across New Mexico and interviewed with both local and national media. We began with the family's art tradition. Both Benjamin and Geraldine were raised in pottery traditions, though in different styles. Geraldine learned from her great-grandmother, who ground and sifted her own clay and made her own pigments for the pots. Now a master potter known throughout the United States, Geraldine was passing the same tradition down to Shawna.
It was when I was little. I used to stay with her after school. There was a lot of her grandkids that played over there, and she was always busy working with clay or making her own pigments and stuff. We would watch her, and I used to follow her. There was a little ditch there in the area where she would go wash out like the spinach and stuff that she was going to boil, and I would ask her questions. And when she was grinding clay, same thing, what are you doing that for? And to make pottery. And then when she did mix her clay, we watching her coil, roll out her clay and then coil and blend it together. And she did a lot. I always call her the strongest grandma in the world. And then when we go to school, I used to tell my teacher what I did or what I saw from her and what she was doing and what she made out of the clay. And then as I grew up, went to school, was going to school for a beautician because I always liked to do a lot of like braids. And that's when I first started learning how to French braid and fishtail and cutting hair. I used to cut my brother's hairs. And at the same time, I wanted to do bookkeeping because, I did a lot of that during high school and typing class and stuff like that. And so that's what I wanted to do. But when I graduated, I had met Ben in high school. I got pregnant during high school. I had Shawna when I was young, and we didn't want to go anywhere, leave her. We didn't want my parents to watch her. We moved to Dallas for 3 years. Those 3 years, we ended up just me, him, and Shawna there. And then our second daughter, Benita, I had her in Dallas in 1985, our second daughter. And so her and Shawna were, like 2 years apart. We got married out in Dallas, and our landlords were actually our witness. So we're going to buy a mobile home out there in Grand Prairie, Texas. And I told him, you know what, Ben? I said, I'm not even used to city life. I cannot adjust to it. I don't know nobody here. I don't have family here. I said, I just want to go back home. And he said, well, if you want to do that, we can do that too. So we came back to New Mexico. We lived in Albuquerque for about a couple of years. Then he started going to firefighting from here. He must have had a crew here. And then he was just saving up and stuff. And then we ended up buying a mobile home here and moved it into my parents' land for the time being. So my grandmother gave my brother the land where we're at now, but he didn't want it. He said, no, because there's 2 arroyos, and I don't know how I'm ever going to build over there anyway. So between me and Ben, we knew this man that could actually make a road, put a culvert there and put a road. So we've been here since, and I have a shop here in my own home in my area. Tourists come see our pottery. That's how we sell our pots. We go to art shows. We did our art show last week, and we took ribbons. We took 3 ribbons. We took the highest award there, which was called the Claudine Riddle Award. But we only sell to people that we, like our own direct customers, people that stop by, or whether we go to shows, that we meet people there. They buy directly from us because everything that we make each tell a story. And then we used to do hands-on with a lot of colleges, museums here in New Mexico. We did the University of Minneapolis for 17 years with the students out there. We used to do a lot of that, lectures and hands-on, but we stopped during COVID.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Arr, fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Geraldine says that teaching Shawna the family pottery tradition was a joy and a bonding experience because she truly loved spending time with her oldest daughter. Everyone did, from childhood on. Shawna was outgoing and interested in people. It was a skill that helped her in both her careers, but it was also just part of who she was.
If you got to know her, I mean, you would be attached to her immediately. That's just the way she was, She just got along with people, and sometimes she'll be standing at a grocery store in line, and before you know it, she'll be talking away with the person that's in front of her. And she always knew how to acknowledge people, and she always says, if they don't want to say hi, I mean, I understand, because we all have different feelings. Maybe we're not in a good mood at the time, or maybe we just don't feel like talking, or and she accepts it, because she always says, I did my part. I don't feel bad, maybe because they do feel hurt. Maybe something's going on with them today, but I did what I did. She always said that. So she never made herself feel bad about it if someone didn't acknowledge her back. But that's how we grew up anyways, from my grandma and my grandpa's side. Growing up, she always said, say hi to someone, and if they don't say hi, don't feel bad. You did your part. And then, if someone says something bad to you, or you do something bad, you always apologize, say you're sorry, or hug them. And that's how me and my husband taught her and her siblings when they were growing up. You guys are all going to need each other's one day. You guys can't be fighting or, hating one another, because you just never know when you're going to need one another. But we never, ever let them go to bed be mad at one another. So that's how they grew up. And now, they're all grown up. And when we have family functions, they're here for each other, because we are grandparents now. And if our oldest daughter is doing something for their nephew or nieces, we're all here putting in our 2 cents to, put this event together. We're helping one another. So it becomes a big event, but it's still fun. And that was how she was. She was always the main one planning. This is how we're going to do this. You're going to do this. You're going to make this. I'll make this, and all this stuff. And, now we miss all that. When things are going on, that's the first thing we always say is, I wish Shawna was here. Man, she would have already had this made and planned. We would have already got this done and ready to go.
When mother and daughter spoke by phone that evening, Shawna was already home, but she planned to go back out. She had errands to finish and groceries her family would need in the morning that just couldn't wait. They also made plans to get together the next day. Geraldine went to bed without worry. It was the kind of call they'd shared many times before, full of laughter and jokes. So when her phone rang in the early morning hours, she wasn't frightened at first. She was confused.
It was August 1st at 3:15 in the morning. The phone rang, but at the time I knew everybody was home, safe, asleep. So I didn't know who this person was. So I ignored that call. And it just rang back to back. But the second time I noticed that the number looked familiar. So my husband told me just to answer it. So I did answer it. And the officer that called me, he asked me first, are you Miss Toya? And I said, yes. And he said, well, we found your daughter, Shawna, deceased in her vehicle at a park. And I said, no, it can't be. I said, I just talked to her by then it was like about 4 hours. 4 hours because I talked to her at 11. I said, it can't be because I just talked to her. And he said, does she drive? Then he just did the description of her vehicle that she was in. And then he read the information, like her address and her birth date. I said, no, I started yelling. I was just in shock. And my husband sat up and he said, what? And then he just sat there and I put it on speaker and he started telling us that they were driving around in the area and they noticed a white vehicle parked at the parking lot at a park. And they noticed that all the windows were rolled down. So they went over there to see her in the ride. But I guess they're trying to move her or wake her up or something. And they said that she was unresponsive. So the EMS or whoever, they tried to resuscitate, but they said she was already gone. So at the time they said they don't know really how long it was that she was sitting there and how long she had passed. So when they tried to resuscitate her, they couldn't bring her back.
In our FOIA, or IPRA, as New Mexico terms it, fulfillment from the Albuquerque Police Department, we received a series of body cam clips from officers who were on the scene. Because the clips are redacted and provide inconsistent sound, we can only share observations based on the footage available to us. We cannot say if this paints a complete picture of what occurred that night after responders were on the scene. The footage that we have begins around 2:28 a.m. with one or more officers on scene before other first responders arrive. Based on what's shown, the first law enforcement members approach Shawna's car and call out, attempting to wake her. She's sitting in the driver's seat. An individual radios in to report that she appears to be unconscious and not breathing. They vocalize that she feels warm, and the car feels warm, and that they see no drugs in the car, but that there is a bottle of alcohol in view. Based on redaction, we cannot see the specifics of measures that are taken at that time, but they seem to determine that she's deceased. One individual notes that Narcan was not administered. An officer speaks with someone who appears to have been sleeping in the park. The officers present stand in the lot until other first responders approach the vehicle. Based on what we observed, no aid is rendered to Shawna during this period. And based on timestamps, roughly 10 minutes have passed since authorities reportedly first arrived on scene. At that point, a newly arrived first responder appears to check Shawna's vitals and becomes more urgent in their actions. She's then pulled from the vehicle and onto the gravel lot. Due to video redaction, we can't see everything that follows, but life-saving efforts clearly begin. Later clips show that Shawna did not survive. We see what looks like more officials arriving and officers searching her vehicle, and then phone calls being made from a patrol car. Geraldine Toya's memories of that night are as fractured as those clips. She'd just been told that her daughter was dead. Then she said she was told that Shawna's car keys would be taken to Shawna's home, where her boyfriend and her children were waiting. Geraldine said that she was advised to retrieve the keys and to move the car immediately because the park wasn't safe. But she was confused, she says, because she expected that hatchback might have been retained for investigation.
And so I told him, okay, but I said, isn't there anything else that you're going to do with it? I mean, did you guys even look through it to see why or what happened? And he said, oh yeah, the medical or whoever that went to go get her body told them that there was it didn't look like no foul play. So I'm all like in shock and like, what's going on? So we immediately, I didn't even brush my hair, nothing. We just got in the ride. It was a Sunday morning. We rushed out all the way, like over 100 miles per hour. Not a cop in sight. I was just waiting to get pulled over so he can escort us down.
The family found Shawna's car with its windows rolled up and the doors locked. Inside, empty grocery bags were scattered throughout the vehicle. The compartments were open, and Shawna's phone was located on the driver's side of the vehicle. To Geraldine, This did not match how Shawna typically kept her car. Geraldine's husband Benjamin used napkins from inside the car to cover the steering wheel before driving it, careful not to leave his own fingerprints or disturb any potential evidence. When they arrived at Shawna's home, he discovered something on the passenger side seat. Another wallet. It wasn't Shawna's.
He went inside, got paper towel, came out, and then he opened it, and then here was a lady's phone with her ID, her social security card, and like some cards from like shelter places or rehabilitation centers and stuff like that. And he said, "Look at what I found." I said, "Oh, shoot." I said, so I immediately called APD back.
Geraldine contacted dispatch to reach the officers who'd been at the park that morning. She provided the time frame and location, and the dispatcher gave her the names and badge numbers of the two officers. Dispatch said that the officers were at another scene and that they'd call her back.
I waited. I kept calling like probably every other hour. Then finally I called OMI. I talked to Francisco from OMI. He said he was on scene. He said that they said there was no foul play. So they took her down to their facility there. He told me, we're going to do an autopsy. It's going to be internal and external. And then we'll go from there to see what's going on or what happened.
When Geraldine asked about retrieving Shawna's body, she said that she was told it could be a while due to a backlog of unidentified deceased persons. She said the official told her that decisions about evidence and reports were up to the investigating officers. And while they waited to hear more, she said that they went into Shawna's home, where her children were still asleep. They still didn't know what had happened.
We went in there, oh my God, to see them all asleep, so peaceful, not even knowing what's going on. It wasn't, I don't know, waking them up and telling them that we're coming to Jemez because their mom isn't coming with us. Their mom ain't coming home. Getting their clothes, unpacking their clothes to bring them home because, you know, there's nobody there. Her boyfriend was there and he didn't want to leave the house. He said, "I'll stay here and I'll wait." And he kept saying, "She's taking me to my interview tomorrow, so I'll just wait for her to come home." And I said, "She's not coming home. She's not." And we cried with him and he was so mad. He was hitting the walls. And he couldn't believe it. We all couldn't. And the kids were so confused. Got the baby's diapers or milk or bottles, everything, and came all the way to Jemez. And then at 10 o'clock, a lady from the OMI called me and she asked me, after the autopsy is completed, she asked me where they would take her body, which funeral home. And I said, she's not going to be taken to any place like that because we're natives. We're from Jemez and we do our own traditional burial. And she said, "Oh, okay, well, I'll let them know." That's all she said. And she hung up. And then, so I told my husband, he goes, "You didn't talk to Francisco?" And I said, "No." So I called back right away and she answered again.
When Geraldine tried to follow up on the promised autopsy, she encountered the first of several confusing communications from OMI officials.
And then I asked her for him. I said, "Can I talk to Francisco?" And she said, "Well, he's not here. He's gone for 3 days." And I said, "What?" I said, "I just talked to him this morning and he told me that he was going to do the autopsy on my daughter." And she goes, "Oh, well, he's not here, but they're doing examinations." And I didn't know what she meant by that. So I figured, okay, I'll let them do what they have to do.
Geraldine was surprised when she received a call at 2 p.m. saying Shawna was ready for pickup, since she'd been told earlier that it wouldn't be completed until that evening or the next morning. Her husband and her brother, who work for EMS and was familiar with the process, went to retrieve Shawna's body at around 4 p.m. Geraldine says that she was under the assumption that an autopsy had been performed on her child. She told us that it seemed fast, but she thought that perhaps Shawna had been made a priority.
But when we took her out of the body bag, she still had all her clothing on. Her hair was still in a clip. She still had makeup on, but she had gravel on her back. And then we started noticing her bruise on her face. Her lip was all dried and cracked, and it had like a bump, she had been hit. So I started taking pictures where she was bleeding from her neck, and her cheek was bruised, her lip was bruised, her back, she had gravel everywhere. So I called back and I asked them, I said, we noticed that she wasn't cut open or anything. There was no autopsy done. And they said, oh yeah, well, let me see. I'll be back. I'll get the paperwork and I'll pull it up. And then he said, oh yeah, so if you notice that she's wearing different color bands on her wrists, he said, those are the steps that they do when they examine them. So they do like blood work and start naming the different places where they take them to examine. And then I said, well, what's the cause of death? And he said, well, we won't have that till maybe at least a couple of weeks, is what he told me. I asked my brother, I said, is this how it looks when they do an autopsy? He goes, no, they didn't even touch her. To be honest with you, they just did blood work, probably urine sample. He was going on with, what those 3 bands that were on her wrist was. And he said, yeah, but they didn't do no autopsy. She's not cut anywhere. She's not opened up anywhere. So pretty much, they just threw her in the freezer. He said, I'm sorry to say, that's how I see it. And that was it. So, like I said, this is our first time ever, going through this situation that I was lost. Baby, I said, you were just happy with this yesterday. Oh my God, not even 24 hours ago. We were still together. We were laughing, we were eating, we were just having so much fun. And why are you laying right here like that? Can you talk to me? Can you tell me, please? I was just sitting there, just looking at her, and praying and talking with her.
After Shawna's burial, Geraldine immediately filed for guardianship of the children, since school had started, while simultaneously trying to deal with APD. 5 days later, police called her at 3:30 a.m. to explain why they had determined that there was no foul play. While she spoke to the officers, including the one in training who'd been on the scene and his lieutenant, she said that she could not get answers to her questions.
You know how everything's a subscription now? Music, movies, even socks. I swear if
To continue this ad, please upgrade to Premium Plus Platinum.
What? No, anyway, Blue Apron...
This is a pay-per-listen ad. Please confirm your billing.
Oh, that's annoying. At least with the new Blue Apron, there's no subscription needed. Get delicious meals delivered without the weekly plan.
Wait, no subscription?
Keep the flavor. Ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
For months, Geraldine said she was caught in bureaucratic confusion. APD kept telling her that the incident report had not been submitted yet, while OMI said that they were still waiting for reports and that their process could take months, not the weeks that she'd been told. When she finally received something from APD, after 3 months of calling, she said that it was only a paragraph long. She also had not been able to discuss the evidence that she'd found in Shawna's car, another person's ID, the empty grocery bags with no purchased items, and missing cash meant for a money order. And why had the car been in such disarray? Then, at a rally for missing Indigenous woman Pepita Redhair, Geraldine met advocate Darlene Gomez, who'd invited families to attend. Darlene then arranged a meeting with the district attorney's office and attorney general's office, as well as the FBI. Geraldine hoped federal authorities might be more responsive.
I went to the FBI office in Albuquerque. I did a meeting with the investigators that were there at the time. I went with Darlene Gomez, colleague from the law offices. She went with me and Ben to meet with them to let them know what happened. And at the time, I turned in the lady's phone, her ID. I turned in Shawna's phone. Finally, they're going to do something. They're going to get something done. They're going to find something. I had this strength, this hope, I felt good at that time. Then all of a sudden, I don't know where it went. There was nothing. Every time I called, there was nobody to explain, no one to tell me who's on the case.
Finally, an agent called Geraldine, and they spoke several times so that she could provide more information about the case. As Geraldine began attending MMIP advocacy events and appearing in media coverage, she connected with many other families. Despite building this network and gaining media attention, she felt that nothing was being done to address the unanswered questions in Shawna's case. That frustration would come to a head during her first major meeting with officials.
And the first time we went to the meeting, the first thing they asked was, did this happen in Jemez? And I was so upset. I looked at them and I said, are you kidding me? I said, you know what? You guys can't always be blaming it on jurisdiction. This happened on your jurisdiction. Now you guys get something done about it, because I don't want no excuses for you to say that you got to go somewhere else to get permission for you to go in there to investigate. I said, no, you're on your jurisdiction. You do something. I said, I was so mad. Ben had to calm me down. My anxiety went up. I was even yelling. I was so hurt. I just wanted to know. That's all I needed to know. That's all I want is to find out what happened to her, who hurt her. It's we're human too. It don't matter to them. You guys go to school to get your certificates to do this job. And why am I all of a sudden an investigator for my own daughter's death? I'm supposed to be an artist. That's what my livelihood is. I'm a potter. I'm a known potter. And still, I'm doing you guys' job. And why can't you do it? Please, I said, just help us. I need answers. And if somebody hurt her, I don't want this perpetrator out there running around thinking they can get away with it.
Next time on The Fall Line, we continue Shawna Toya's story and her family's examination of the details that they feel warrant a new and thorough look at her case. You'll also hear from Darlene Gomez, who's advocated for so many victims and their families that have appeared on our show and across New Mexico, Arizona, Alaska, Montana, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Utah. If you have any information that you feel could aid in a reinvestigation of Shawna Toya's death and the circumstances surrounding it, reach out to Darlene Gomez at the law offices of Darlene Gomez, dargomezlaw.com. That's DAR, gomezlaw.com. Or the Albuquerque Police Department at 505-843-STOP. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. Our therapy fund is paid for through Patreon and Apple Premium subscriptions. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure you're set for automatic downloads so you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, is out everywhere. Find out more through the link in our show notes. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laura Norton. Interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Engineered by Southern Gothic Media with Rachel Boyd. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy and Brandy C. Williams. Special thanks to Liz Lipka.